Welcome back once again to the Necro Zoo. I am Bone. And in this one, let's go ahead and add one more figure to my McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Now, today we will take a look at the collector's edition of Guy Gardner. Now, a lot of people have been wanting McFarlane to take a stab at this figure for a while now, and I have heard some pretty positive things about this release. Now, of course, we'll go ahead and take our own look at it, do a little bit of touch-ups, do a little bit of modifications, some repainting, and in the end, once again, take a pretty solid release and turn it into an awesome figure to add to our DC Multiverse collection. Now, I did end up buying 3 of this guy. I got the Platinum. I think I found that at Walmart. And then I ended up picking up 2 from the Best Buy website. Now, he does look pretty famous in the packaging, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. But first, he does come with your standard black DC Multiverse stand. The only difference being that the collector's edition does come with a silver stamped DC logo. He also comes with his Datafall card. On the front, you have some pretty nice source material from the comics. The only thing being that, of course, this is a more modern take on Guy Gardner. Now, I came up knowing about Guy Gardner through Justice League Europe. That is where I first became aware of this kind of cocky, jerkish Green Lantern. And I have to say, back then, didn't really know a lot about him. And the main thing I do remember him from is, of course, Batman knocking him out with one punch. The second thing that always sticks in my mind is when he had a very awesome, violent, horrible fight with Metamorpho. I think that's in Justice League Europe. If you look into it, the artwork always stuck in my mind. I think it was done by Bart Sears. But man, those images stayed in my mind for a long time. Not really ruining my image of Guy Gardner, but pretty much losing some respect for him. Him always coming out at the short end of the stick. But I will give him this much: for all of his bravado and pig-headedness, he will definitely not back down. So pretty cool. Of course, on the back, we do have some information. So we'll hold on to that. Now, he does come with a nice assortment of accessories. You do get 2 alternate gripping hands. Pretty nice that they did add the ring on the right hand for this one. And of course, if you ever get a gun construct or something like that, these come with ready-made trigger fingers. Now, I did put the fist on him because, of course, that's how I like to review the figures, with double fist. But he also has a left open splayed hand. This is a pretty nice hand for getting some emotion out of him when you're doing figure photography. And a very nice alternate hand, which is a pointing finger with the ring added. Pretty nice. Now, that's one of the additions that I know McFarlane, like, the more he went on with the line, he was going to have more, alternate hands, hands that have texture, hands that have wrapping, like Wildcat here. And I knew that the longer he had the license, the more alternate hands he was going to be able to have for the different figures. So although it is kind of sad to see that he'll only have the license for more than a year, I think at the end of that, we'll have a very nice DC Multiverse collection to look back on and still customize and draw from when we continue doing content on DC action figures. Now, another thing you get is you do get 2 alternate face plates. Now I have the regular stoic face on him, but he does have a smirking alternate plate, and he also has a kind of weird looking yelling faceplate. Now there is something pretty interesting about this one, but of course I'll show that later on in the video. He also does come with an alternate wig. Now you can you can switch out from his more pompadour new era hair, or go really classic and old school with the bowl cut. Now this has come into play here in modern times with that actor Finian, I guess from the trailer for the new Superman. He really went deep with that bowl cut. But ironically, if you're a real hardcore collector, a classic DC fan, you prefer your Guy Gardner with the bowl cut. It's just something that's very iconic and very distinctive of him as a character. So pretty cool. You can swap in and out these alternate hairstyles. And of course, you do get a very unique lantern for him. The thing being that this one is very tiny. It does have a little bit of paint on it, but besides that, just some nice green translucent plastic. Although, as we know, the lanterns are not a construct, they're physical energy sources for the lanterns to recharge their ring, but always nice. I think we're up to about 20 different lanterns that McFarlane has given us, so that's pretty cool to take note of. We'll hold on to that. Now let's go ahead and take a closer, more detailed look at Guy Gardner. Now, this is his more traditional costume. You have that vest with the collar. You have that large belt, which is also comic accurate to the source material. Now, something I did notice about this guy, and I mean, there could be little things that I'm missing, but for the most part, this is all original sculpt. The lower part of the shoes, the boots, the forearm gloves, the vest. I think one thing that might be, used from another figure would be the trunks underneath this larger overlay of the vest. I can't be sure unless I go back and look at other figures. Even the face sculpt and the hair, everything is originally sculpted, so that is pretty nice. To see McFarlane put the extra effort into this classic Green Lantern character. And I do have the regular neutral face with the newer poofed up hair of the of the modern era. Not really how I remember my Guy Gardner, but it is a clean look from the comics. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at that, faceplate head sculpt. They really brought out some alternate engineering here because they give you the alternate hairstyles. Now, you do know when you take everything off of this guy, it's pretty much nightmare fuel to look at the head without any hair or the faceplate. But the way they executed this usually works pretty well. Now, I did learn some more tips on working with the faceplates, so we'll talk about that later on in the video. But this modern era of Guy Gardner really matching up with how he looks in the more modern comics. Take a look at the articulation. Doesn't look down too far. Pretty short range there. Looks up pretty well, but still not as high as I would like him to. Of course, you got right to left. And of course, you could tilt the head for some attitude. Now, big problem people have had is the faceplate. The way the seam line looks when it attaches onto the head. But I did find a trick to make that a little bit more seamless. So I'll tell you that in a little bit when we look at the little mods that I did. But going down, you do got a good amount of range. Now, the paint apps and everything are very nicely done. The lantern symbol being very clean and crisp. You do got some waist articulation, tilt-a-whirl, swivel. That's a little bit of a forward crunch, which is nice, although it will be hindered by that vest. You got that shoulder socket and bushing joint that gives you some movement. Now, this one does have the little rings inside the shoulder, although he does have the vest. I'm going to be removing those because they kind of restrict the range of motion and they're not really needed to cover anything up inside there. So I'll remove those later on. You got a bicep swivel, double jointed elbows that look pretty clean. Straighten them out, moving down to some newly sculpted gloves into the left fist. And on the other side, you have the same thing, but you have a ring on the fist there. So pretty nice version of Guy Gardner. Go down to the thighs. Man, these thighs are really tight. You hardly get any kind of thigh swivel at all. So I will be modding this as well and show you how it adds a lot more range later on in the video. But you got double jointed knees, straighten them out, up and down at the ankle, right to left, rocker, and toe articulation. Now, pretty simple lower body. You got the legs that have pretty much no sculpt work. So these are some pretty nice new legs. And the boots are sculpted differently than anything we've seen before. So that is pretty nice. Now, you do still have that hip rotation that McFarlane gives us at the hips, even though the swivel is pretty tight. Take a look at them from the bottom, no tread and no identifying marks. Moving up the back, looks pretty good into that big thick belt, the back of the vest, and the popped collar. So all in all, pretty standard, solid release from McFarlane. Now, if you were a big Guy Gardner fan, you could get this, have all the extra added accessories, and have fun displaying him and using him for some figure photography. But of course, you know me, I always have to add my own touches. Now, one thing I did learn is that if you extend the neck peg, once again, I extended the neck peg, a very small millimeter of length, and that allows him to look down a lot more to where his chin pretty much touches the top of his chest. And you can look really high up, which is something great for flying poses and for posing him for figure photography. So extending the neck peg really added a lot of range to the figure, as well as giving him a little bit more of a statuesque look, making him look a little bit taller. Now I did remove the rings from the shoulder to give him a lot more range because those shoulder rings were really tight, and just reducing the movement at the shoulders, going down to the thighs. If you go back and look at my best Superman mods video, you'll see what I did to the hip undercarriage where the legs connect to, and I did the exact same thing to this one. And what that does is give you a lot more range at the hips, which allows you to move the boot from side to side without having a thigh cut. You get a lot more range and smooth movement, as well as leaving the peg that goes into the thigh outserted a little bit, like don't shove it in all the way, which also gives them a little bit more height, adding to the better symmetrical look of the figure in a whole. So that's pretty cool. Added some movement, added some height. Once you do that hip mod that I show in that Superman video. So now he looks like a really cool Green Lantern Guy Gardner. Awesome on your shelf and awesome to add to your collection. And before I move on to the Platinum version, I do want to bring out the DC Universe Classics version of Guy Gardner. Now, there's very minimal differences I saw here. Now, the color of the hair is something that I noticed right away. This one being a little bit more reddish with an orange tinge, while this McFarlane one kind of has a more blonde feel to him, which kind of reflects from the source material. I noticed that the DC Universe Classics has a white stripe down the side of the pants, which I may look into to see just how comic accurate that is, because it does give a little bit more detailing, a little bit more pizzazz to Gardner's costume. So we may look into that. But aside from that, Mattel did a pretty good effort. The only negative, the big negative I would say, besides the old articulation, is that head sculpt is pretty bad. I mean, if you look at that, you can really tell how the old Mattel's DC Universe Classics, the face sculpts were not always the best. But it's a pretty good Guy Gardner figure. I mean, this has been in my collection for years, but I am pretty happy to move on to my new 7-inch McFarlane Guy Gardner. Now, another thing you could do with this one is you can add different effects when you're doing figure photography. Like I, had to mod it a little bit, but I added this on to this Green Lantern. The faceplates. Another thing I did was that open mouth faceplate, that yelling faceplate, just looked really derpy to me. It just had an off look. And I started, kind of thinking about different things. And I remember the Geoforce figure by McFarlane. One of the faceplates had the whited out eyes. And I kind of wanted to emulate that a little bit. So on this faceplate, I made the eyes green, just covering them completely. And it really works a lot better. It kind of makes you feel like he's, letting all of the Green Lantern energy flow through his body. So I got some pretty cool pictures of him with this faceplate. Really adds to make it feel a lot different than the way it was in its standard version. Now, sometimes the faceplates don't really want to like fit well onto the head. And what I did learn is if you heat it up with the heat gun or with the blow dryer and then push it on, it kind of like forms a little bit better to the faceplate, and then just let it go and let it, cool down. And it'll basically keep that tightness. That seam line will be very minimal, and it just shapes itself a lot better to the faceplate. So that's a tip that I learned. And then we move on to the platinum version. Now, I didn't want to go too much into the mods with this one, but I did extend the neck peg right away. That helps a lot in your range of motion. But another thing I wanted to do was give them a more traditional red-haired look. So I did end up repainting the hair, putting on the bowl cut, which is more classic to Guy Gardner. Then I sealed the hair so that it wouldn't be so glossy. Gave him the faceplate that's kind of a, smirking face, which really matches with this version of Guy Gardner, which is, I think he quit the Corps, the Green Lantern's Corps, and he ended up finding a yellow ring. So when you open up this one, it does come with the rings being yellow. The lantern is yellow that comes with him. And what I ended up doing, just to, spice it up a little bit, is I also yellowed out the eyes to the screaming face. Now, once again, this made this go from my least favorite faceplate to my favorite faceplate. Had a lot of fun adding some energy effects to him and taking some photos. It just changes the whole dimension of how this faceplate feels by blocking out the eyes. You don't get that goofy feel from it. In fact, it makes it feel a lot more terrifying and spooky. So besides that, I didn't really do the hip mods for this one. I thought it had enough elevation just by doing the neck plug. But in the future, I could end up doing the mods to give them a lot more range. But I'm kind of leaning towards this version of Guy Gardner. I think he was called Warrior or Guardian or something like that when he was in this specific form of Guy Gardner. But really ended up being a battle between which one I enjoyed more. Now, you can take the red-headed repaint and switch it over to the green one and give you a more iconic Green Lantern Guy Gardner look from the 80s and 90s. But anyways, guys, had a lot of fun. We're going to keep reviewing McFarlane figures. We're going to keep customizing McFarlane figures. We got more than a year left. That's a lot of videos that I'm going to have to work on. But you guys keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.